Welcome back to the channel, and first of all I'd like to say a big thank you for all of the positive feedback from the last episode. I was especially pleased to get some messages from people who are about to go through ACL reconstruction themselves, so hopefully you'll get some real value from these next couple of episodes. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the surgery itself and the early stages of rehabilitation. As I spoke about in the last episode, the decision to have the ACL reconstruction wasn't an easy one because I was actually fit and in good condition, riding the bike every day, but if I ever wanted to run again properly with any level of consistency, I would need to have the surgery. So I decided I would go down that road, and the doctor actually offered me a slot maybe 3 days later. But I wasn't quite ready for that, so we eventually decided on a date 2 or 3 weeks after the consultation, and I spent those couple of weeks enjoying riding the bike and getting my head around the fact that I would be not too capable for the foreseeable future. So the day of the surgery came, and I must admit to feeling quite strange walking in there because I was walking in fit and healthy, but I knew that within the next few hours I wouldn't be able to walk. So there were some second thoughts going through my mind, but ultimately it was the right decision. So in years gone by, to recreate damaged ACL, they would use a donation from a cadaver, but now they tend to use your own tissue, and there's a few places they can take this from. It's very common the patella tendon or the hamstring just behind the knee, but in my case they used tissue from my quadriceps tendon, which involved making an incision above the knee, taking a large chunk of my own tendon out and using this to become the new ACL basically. So once they've taken out the donor graft from the quadriceps tendon, they make a hole through the femur, another hole through the tibia, and they feed your own tendon through this hole and fix it in place to become the new ACL. And over the course of the next 9 to 12 months, that tendon tissue actually turns into ligament tissue, and hopefully gives you the stability that you previously didn't have. And during this operation itself, it was quite a strange experience because I was sedated, with some sedation into the hand, and from there they give you an intradural, which is similar to an epidural, so you're completely numb from the waist down. And I don't actually remember receiving the intradural, the injection into the spine, but I was certainly awake on the operating table, which was a little bit unsettling until there was one of the staff beside me. I kind of was smiling at him to get his attention, so he knew I was awake, and he smiled back and he seemed quite relaxed that I was awake, so that relaxed me. And it's strange hearing all of this drilling and staples being fired into the knee and these kind of things, but being unable to feel anything. And it's unlike at the dentist where your mouth is frozen and you feel some pressure and movement and that kind of thing. In this case, you don't feel any of that. You feel absolutely nothing. So yeah, that was the surgery, and I was in the hospital for 1 day, for 1 night. I was released the next day after the doctor came to check everything. And a little word of warning, if you ever have surgery in Spain, even though it was private, you need to supply your own crutches, which I wasn't aware of, so we had to source some crutches to leave the hospital. So after 24 hours I went home, and the rehabilitation started from there. So the first few days I felt like I got off quite lightly actually, because the first few days I didn't really have pain. I didn't have any movement. Like, I was unable to activate the quads. The quadriceps literally wouldn't switch on. I was really focused on trying to make that happen. I was focused a lot on, it was really important to get full leg extension back immediately after this surgery, or certainly within the first couple of weeks. So I was focused on that. Unfortunately, I could straighten the leg fairly quickly, within a few days. Flexing the knee took a lot longer, and that was something I was working on every day, many times, just pulling the leg as far as I could, bending the knee as much as I could, taking it to the point where it was painful, and pushing it just a little bit further each time. And really, there's not much else you can do in the first few days. I was given painkillers, which I didn't really need the first few days, to be honest. I was given antibiotics, which I had to take for the first couple of weeks, and also an injection which I had to give myself every day to prevent blood clots. So the first few days, sleeping was a problem because I just couldn't get comfortable in bed. You can only lie on your back, and there wasn't a lot of sleeping. Obviously, showering is impossible. You're not allowed to do that in the first couple of weeks. So washing was a pain. Other than that, the first few days were pretty uneventful. The surgery was on the Friday, and I went back to see the doctor on the Wednesday. So once I went back for the initial check, I was in a dressing, like compressed bandages, heavily compressed from the ankle up to the middle of my thigh. And the doctor opened this to check the wounds. I had 4 holes in the knee, 2 from the ACL surgery and 2 from the meniscus repair that they did at the same time, and also 1 cut above the knee where they took the tendon from. So all of those had staples in them. Everything looked good. There was nothing was leaking, nothing was infected. So I was put back into the same compression, which it was a bit of a pain, to be honest, because it meant I couldn't isolate the knee for the inflammation, which would become a problem over the next week or so. And at that stage, I was also put into a splint. So it was a protective splint, which on the first week, it would only allow 30 degrees of flexion on the knee. In the second week, it would allow 60 degrees of flexion, and on the third week, it would allow 90 degrees of flexion. But to be honest, on each of those weeks, my knee hadn't progressed to be able to do that level of flexion anyway. So, but it did give me stability, and it gave me confidence to walk, which I was walking within a week. I was walking without crutches, but only at home. And if I wanted to leave the house, I certainly had the splint on for the first 3 or 4 weeks. After having the dressing changed that first time, that's when the problems began to start for me. I didn't have pain if I was at home at rest, but anytime I stood up, it was extreme pain for maybe 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. I think just because I was going from an elevated position to standing, then the blood was going into the leg and it was already inflamed. I think just the pressure of extra blood in there. It was 2 to 3 minutes of real pain. It was unpleasant. But thankfully that only lasted for, I think, 2 weeks. And at the 2-week mark, I was back at the hospital again to have the wounds checked. Everything was good. They took out the staples, which was a relief, because at that point, because the knee was inflamed and these staples were in there, the staples were uncomfortable. So it was a relief to have those taken out. And at that point, I felt like I could really begin the rehabilitation. So for me, the rehab in the first month was, you're very limited in what you can actually do. So I was doing a lot of simply squeezing the quads, making the quads work, because initially they didn't. But within a few days I was able to do a contraction, and the strength of that contraction increased over the coming weeks. I was doing simple things like straight leg raises, bending the knee as far as I could every day, a lot. I was doing squats but using the other leg for most of the support. And really the main focus was the range of motion, just trying to get that back as quickly as possible. It was in these initial stages, I think after 3 weeks I first met with the physio, and I showed the physio what I was doing at home, and she said, to be honest, you're not going to be doing much more than that over the next few weeks, so if you're comfortable doing it at home, you don't need to come. So I was at home for, I think, the first 6 weeks. I did the rehabilitation alone. At this point, the main focus for me was getting to 90 degrees in the knee, trying to get that level of flexion, because that would allow me to be on the bike indoors. And as someone who's accustomed to being outside training every day, it was really important to me to start moving my body, because being at home, being unable to sleep properly, being unable to train, not having the stimulation that you normally would have by being out every day, that was really mentally tough. And I really wanted to be able to at least train on the bike indoors on Zwift, which is an indoor training platform. If you've never seen it, it was a lifesaver for me during this time. So after I think 3.5 weeks, I was able to get a full rotation on the bike, and it was wonderful, but it was also heartbreaking at the same time, because on the bike, like maybe 1 week before the surgery, I can put it on the screen an example of being able to hold 300 watts for an hour, no problem, the heart rate comfortable. I went from that to being able to do 70 watts for 10 minutes. So that was, it was heartbreaking, but it was wonderful at the same time, just to be able to move again. And I felt like, okay, now I'm ready to build. This is where the recovery really begins. So by 6 weeks, I was back at the doctor again, and he was happy with the progress, and he gave me the all clear to ride outside, which this was wonderful news. After being in the house for 6 weeks, to be able to get out and cycle outside again was such a big relief. I wasn't able to actually stand up on the bike, so it was in the saddle the entire time, and it was pushing a very light gear, very high cadence, but just to be out was a wonderful feeling. And it was at this time that I started with the physio, 5 days per week. And the physio I had chosen, I'd done some research, emailed a few different physios. The one I chose is one that worked with my insurance provider, and they were close to home, so it made sense. And when I went there, it was it was an underwhelming experience, I'm going to be honest. I won't name them, but it was okay for me in the initial stages, I'll give them that. But it was the same every single day, and it was like a class-based environment, so there was maybe 5 people in there, and all that it involved was some leg extensions. And literally for 20-30 minutes you'd be doing leg extensions, sitting on the bed and just straightening your leg a lot of times. And for me that was fine, because with this surgery you lose your quadriceps, they completely disappear. You go from having fairly muscular legs from years of endurance training to suddenly having one normal leg and one that is heartbreaking to look at. So to recover that muscle, you need a lot of volume. So these simple leg extension exercises were, in the early stages, it was fine. And they progressed a little week on week by just adding some weight to the ankle, and then they progressed a little bit further by adding some weight to the foot, and that was fine. But the problem for me was I wanted to progress to sport. I didn't want to just be able to stand up and these things that other people in the class were doing. And there were other people in the class who, like an old lady with a bad ankle, for example, and these leg extensions were doing nothing for her. Or there was another old lady with a hip problem, and similarly, it wasn't doing anything for her. So everybody was doing the same, and it just so happened that it suited me for those initial stages. But I wanted to learn things like walking up and down the stairs again, because I was unable to do that, and I always had to ask for how are we going to progress this. It was always me that was pushing the session and leading the session, and it shouldn't be like that. There was no assessment of the knee. There was no progression plan in place. And after, I think, 3 or 4 weeks I was there, and I knew that this wasn't going to get me back to competition. It had served its purpose already, and it was good because there were like laser treatment and those kind of things were available. But if I wanted to be back to a level where I was comfortable running in the mountains on technical terrain, then I was going to need to make a move from here. So that's what I'm going to talk about in the next episode, because if you get the right care, the right treatment, then it makes the world of difference. And I was very, very fortunate with the physio that I found, and the next episode we'll talk all about that, and we'll talk about where I'm up to now. So thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thank you.